Anyway, so I wasn't sure who would all show up today, so thank you for coming. It was a little short notice for all of it. Oh, thank you. Look at that. And so we're just going to briefly overview on a couple of things that involve finances, and those are budgeting, credit, and house buying, because that's what most people have the questions about. We're also going to do a class on downsizing. So for some of the folks that their kids might be moving out of the house and they want to downsize to a smaller house, it's a different way to handle your finances and a different way to purchase property when we do that. But because I had a great conversation with some of you guys about adulting, that's what this class is going to be a little bit about. And I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that I think are important to understand that some people haven't been told. And these are things that I've told my kids since they were little, but I think that they're good to remember. And they do affect everything when it comes to money and all the rest of them. And the first thing is that life is not fair. So there's going to be people that you are better qualified from, in a job, that they get the job that you think that you should have. There's going to be times that you make an offer on a house and somebody else comes along and they get the house, but you had more of a down payment and you really wanted it. And what I've always found out is God does the right things at the right time. And so it's not everybody's time to buy a house right now or to do the rest of it. It's our job to be responsible with our resources and make sure that we use them, basically responsibly. So life is not fair, and it's a good thing to remember in a lot of different instances. The other one is, this is a big one. I say this one a lot every day. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Okay? This applies to pretty much everything when it comes to money too. So you have your eye on the beautiful car. Payment's going to be $650 a month. You can afford it. Doesn't mean you should afford it. You should know how that's going to affect, because what I see all the time is somebody goes out and gets that car, then they come and see me. They want to buy a house. Corey, can you turn down the heat a little? Is it warm enough in here for everybody else? Is it good? It's still chilly? Never mind. And then when they try to buy a house, they have too much what's called debt, and they don't qualify for the house payment. I had a client that sat in my office yesterday in tears because they had gotten some bad advice from their lender. Their lender told them they needed to build credit and told them to go buy a car. They did not have a budget. They did not understand how money works. They did not understand how buying a house works. And they went out and bought a $48,000 vehicle with an $850 car payment. They came back in to buy the house, and guess what happened? They can't afford a house because that $850 car payment needed to come with a master bedroom and a jacuzzi tub, because that was their house. They just couldn't go buy a house again. So because they didn't have a budget, they didn't understand that they couldn't afford this or how this affected their overall financial plan. And so I see that a lot too. And the last one has to do with worldly success. Worldly success. I can't spell. It is a combination of, who knows what worldly success is a combination of? It's an interactive class.
Hard work.
Hard work. You're right. Everybody gets that one right. And then the question is what?
Some people say luck.
And luck. You've been to that class. Okay, now this is worldly success, okay? Because God does not judge our success on quite the same levels. But worldly success, this is where you have the McMansion, this is where you have all those things. Combination of hard work and luck. And the reason I'm saying that is because a lot of people now are graduating from college, and they feel that they put in the time, they've got their 4-year degree, and that means that they should get the big house, the big car, and the nice career. And luck plays a part in this. Luck really has something to do with it from that standpoint of worldly success. You have to be at the right place at the right time. You have to talk to the right people. Yes?
They didn't know what time it was at or where it was at.
Oh, okay.
I just told them it was now.
It was now. Do they live far away?
They're in Battleground.
Oh, they're in Battleground? Oh, they could be here in 10 minutes if they wanted to, but that's okay. And so you have to understand that it is a bit of that combination of things being at the right time. You're not entitled to all these things just because you exist. And there really is a whole generation that got the trophies on all the teams, that there was never winners, there was never losers, and they're graduating from college, and I can speak freely to this because my kids are all millennials. And they feel they got the degree, they should now be able to just walk in and announce that they deserve this fantastic job, and they should have the nice car. They shouldn't start out with the 2000 jalopy, and they should have the nice house at $650,000. And the problem is that just because you exist doesn't mean the world's going to hand you those things.
Tell them the first one.
Yeah.
Lesson number 1, life is not fair. So I'm sure that some of us older ones here probably have some other lines like this. But when my kids were little, we said this to them from when they were this big, is they wanted something and their little cohorts, you know, their little buddies everywhere, they all had those things. And I'd just say, life is not fair. Mom and dad don't have the money for that. Their parents are rich. You're going to have to deal. And how you deal with some of these realities is going to dictate a lot of how your finances and your future goes. So that's kind of just the little things I want to touch on, because all of this affects a lot of those other things that we're going to talk about when it comes to your money. Namely, number 2, this one's big. Okay? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Have a client right now that wanted to buy a $450,000 house. It's going to take 50% of their gross income, and we're going to talk about how this all plays in, gross, net, all that fun stuff. Okay? They qualify. They can buy that house. If they buy that house, they will not have any money to ever take a vacation, according to their budget. But they didn't have a budget. So I can look at their income, I can look at their debts, and I can go, let's talk about this, let's have a conversation. So I sent them the budgeting worksheet I'm going to send home with all of you guys too, and I said, I want you to see, when you put all your line items in of everything you want to do that's important to you, how much money you have left to pay for a house. And they came back with a $400 less amount than they thought they did. And all of a sudden, they're okay with a $375 house and not a $450 house. But they could have bought the $450,000 house. And if you don't know how all those things work together, some loan officer somewhere in your life is going to tell you you can have that nice new $45,000 car. And they're going to tell you that you can have that $500,000 house. And unless you understand how the money works and how that affects your life, you're going to say yes, and then you're going to regret it. Okay? And there's lots of ways you can regret bad money decisions. So I wanted to just talk about budgeting, as I disappeared behind here. I'll give you guys each one of these.
Yeah, you can teach this to your little one.
There you go. You don't want one, babe?
I got an financial advisor at home.
You do. You do. Okay. Somebody give me the definition of budgeting. What is a budget?
Something you set aside for X amount of time, I guess.
That's pretty close, yeah?
Allocating your funds to certain things, fun things, priorities.
Okay. So it's an estimate. Here's the legal formal definition. It's a noun, right? What's a noun? Person, place, or thing, right? It's a thing. An estimate often itemized of expected income and expenses for a given period. And somebody pointed out to me that when we think of a budget, that'd be my husband, I'll give him credit. When we think of a budget, we always think about expenses, income and expenses. But there's another part to that that doesn't get talked about very much, and that is saving. So people talk a lot about the money's going out the door for bills, but they're not really strategically talking about saving for their future, and that's super important. There's some really interesting statistics and why I'd like to get in front of as many young people as possible, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we do the budgeting class. But when you invest money into your future, how compound interest works. Does anybody know what compound interest works? What it is? What's compound interest?
That's where you have interest, and then you have interest on the interest and the principal, and then you have
That's right.
and then you have interest on the interest and the principal again.
Yes.
And it doubles every 7 or 8 years.
It depends on the rate of interest.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So right now, interest is kind of lousy, so
Yeah.
it doesn't make you a lot of money. If you have money in the stock market right now, it's fantastic.
Money that's not costing you.
Yeah, it's not money.
Right.
So compound interest is when you make interest on interest. So an example would be you have $1 savings in the bank, you get 25 cents interest on the $1. So you make 25 cents interest on every dollar. Now you, in that month, now you have $1.25 in that month, and you're going to get interest on $1.25 instead of just the dollar. So then you would make about 40 cents interest on that $1.25, and so now you have $1.65, and then you make interest on the $1.65, and it just starts exploding for you.
Now,
Yes.
that still works on the opposite side in a negative manner when it comes to credit card debt.
Yes, it does. That's called, we'll touch on that one here in just a little bit,
Okay.
under the credit section. So credit does it exactly in inverse. You pay to use money, and you don't pay it off because it goes towards interest. So when you have compound interest, there's a statistic briefly about investing that says if you, between the ages of 18 and 26, okay, that's a mere 8 years, invest $2,000 a year, I hope I have this right, I didn't write it down, at 8% interest, and then never put another dime in. You don't have to write this down, I'll give you flyers when we do our other class. But never to put another dime in, compound interest will make you over $1 million at 8% by the time you retire. Hope I have that right. It's not very much money, but because interest works over time, you're making money on the money and on the money, and now you're making money on $2 and then $4 and then $6, and that interest adds up.
So in about 45 years.
Yes. But you're really only just putting in $8,000 at a very, very young age. And I'll double check that statistic. It used to be one that I used all the time in the class, but it's been a little while since I taught that one, so not 100% sure. I just remember it's the sooner you start putting money away, the more time you have for that money to make you money.
Where are we putting it away?
So that would be in today's market, it would have to be in the stock market, because the best you can get on a savings account right now is about 1.1%. When we talk about savings, if you guys go look at your bank statements when you get home, when we start working on the budgeting worksheet and you start figuring out budgeting, then you will find that most banks, 95% of banks, pay about 0.1 or 0.01%. It's negligible. You'll have money in there, you'll make like 3 cents a year. It's like, there's no point in having money in a savings bank. But if you put money in an online bank, right now, Ally Bank and Capital One have the best interest rates. Yes?
Go and check out Boeing
BECU?
Employees Credit Union.
Okay, and what do they pay?
They were 6%.
On a savings account? Do you have to, what does it take to be a member?
You have to be a resident of the state of
Washington. Okay. So, I mean, that's good to know. Some of the credit unions do that, but typically it's less than 1%. It's like 0.01 or something that your Chase Bank, that your US Bank, that IQ Credit Union, that's what they pay. Okay, and the reason for that has to do with the fact that interest rates are very low in everything. So if you get low mortgage interest rates, if you have low rates for just about everything, then they're not going to pay out as much money to you on your savings. Those things work together. When you're paying 18% on your mortgage, you're going to get much higher percentage on your savings accounts also. So those things, they work together. Okay? But right now, interest rates are incredibly low, and so the savings rates are really low. So the best I found, but I will check out BECU, is the online banks. There's advantages to using the online banks.
And they're online.
They are online. Oh, BECU, okay. But the online banks don't have any storefronts at all. So you cannot go to the bank and withdraw money, and it takes 2 days for your savings account at Ally or at Capital One to be deposited into your bank account, which is your checking account. So if you're saving for long-term stuff, and we'll break out in the budgeting class a lot more about what types of savings you should do and what you need them for, that's a really, really great place to put them because you can't impulse buy, right? So say you have $10,000 in your online bank account, and then you decide that you really, really need that $900 TV. Well, by the time you get the money out of that savings account, you either have decided you don't need the TV, or you have, you can afford it, you can use that money for that, but it prevents impulse buying. And that's the best rate of return. So if you have, it probably isn't worth it till you have $10,000 or more to switch your money someplace long term, but it's a great way to save money without having access to it right away, which some people just need that discipline. It's like the little timer on the cookie jar, right? You kind of need that little extra bit. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is, why is having a budget important? I got sidetracked on savings.
It makes it easier to live within your means.
It makes it easier to live within your means, yes.
I would think that it would help to remove the emotional aspect of it, because then you're dealing with isolated facts, not just
Right.
what you feel.
So money for people can be very emotional. That's a really good point. A lot of people will impulse shop because it makes them feel better. They have a bad day at work and they're just going to feel better with that $90 pair of shoes. You know, and it happens. And if you can identify that about yourself, then there are steps you can take to make sure that those things don't happen. Because if you have a budget that has a budget in it for $90 shoes, go for it. You know? And if you know that sometimes you just need to do that, for me it's ice cream out of the carton. If you ever see me eating that or saying on Facebook I did that, an ice cream out of the carton day, right babe? Not good days at work. But for everybody it's different. For shopping, for me, I can tell you where every penny goes, and probably to excess, okay? So you can be a little too controlling with money. But ever since, my husband says I have a notebook, it's my brain, I write down my budget in it every month, I check off where pretty much every dime goes. It's good to have that basic budget down, but it can't rule your life either. And your budget needs to have money in it for the fun stuff. You have to have money in there for vacations, you have money in there for other stuff. Okay. What is a balanced budget? You'll hear this in the government, they're incapable of it.
Yes.
A balanced budget.
Where the expenses don't exceed the income?
Right, where whatever you have going out isn't more than what you have coming in.
Your expectations don't exceed your income.
Or that, exactly. Okay, so this is a question that I got a blank look from for my 21-year-old, so I thought I didn't do a very good job of training him on this one. What is the difference between gross income and net income?
Gross is before taxes, net is after.
That's correct.
Well, taxes and other things that
Right.
are taken out of your
Okay,
paycheck.
so you might make $60,000 a year. That's your gross income. If you're salaried, that's $5,000 a month. If you get that $5,000 a month, do you get that in your paycheck? No. Yes.
Depends on what went off in your pre-taxed
Yes.
savings,
Yeah.
vehicle, whatever else. It could be considerably lower.
It will be considerably lower. Who gets their cut out of your gross income? What are the typical expenses that come out of your gross before you get your net? Your net is what you get to keep. Your gross is your gross.
Food stamps.
Well, it pays for food stamps.
Yeah.
Federal taxes in the state of Washington. There's no state income tax in Washington. There is state income tax in Oregon. Try to keep your job in Washington and live in Washington. You pay 11%, I believe, if you work or live in Oregon on top of your federal taxes.
Wait, so I live in Washington, but work in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So you'll want to look at your paychecks and see if you are paying Oregon state tax, income tax. And then when you file your taxes, I know there's some rules about being able to get refunded and different things like that. I'm not an accountant, but I do know that Oregon does have state income tax and Washington does not. So if you are paying Oregon state tax, income tax, then if you were to get a job in Washington at the same pay, it's like getting a 10% raise.
Because they're not taking
The state tax
you
out.
almost need to talk to a CPA
Yeah.
or somebody that's in it to know how to retrieve that.
Well.
Probably about 60 to 70% of that.
Yeah.
There's a formula that's involved.
Yeah. So I don't know if you do your own taxes or you have somebody do them, but they would know that. That's definitely a tax question.
Social Security coming out.
Social Security.
Yeah. Social Security comes out. What does Social Security go towards? It's coming out of your paychecks. It's supposed to go to your retirement. We already know that 100% of it's not going to be available by the time any of us retire. You're still in luck. But the rest of us, not so much. Are you at the cutoff? That's great. That's assuming that we have the same government structure. And so Medicare comes out. That's the same thing. That helps fund your Medicare. And then any other pre-tax withholdings. I can see I might need to do a class just on investing and things like that. Because pre-tax withholdings reduce your taxable income. So I contribute to a 401k, which is a retirement plan through work. And I contribute as much as I can get because not as much as I can contribute, but as much as my employer matches, because it's free money to me, because my employer has a match. So that's a whole other formula if you're working that you want to pay attention to. The other pre-tax typical earnings that you don't pay taxes on are a health savings account. If you don't, I don't know if those of you that are working, how you pay your benefits, if your employer pays your health insurance or not. But if you can take a high deductible plan if you are healthy, and then take a health savings account. A health savings account is money that comes out of your paycheck that is not taxed. And you can use it for any medical expense that you want without ever paying taxes on that income. So we can put the max into ours, and the max for a family is $6,500 a year. So we fully fund our HSA. You have to have a high deductible savings account or high deductible health insurance plan in order to do that. But we fully fund our HSA every year for $6,500. That rolls over every year. So it's like a savings account. You can invest it into retirement accounts if you get too much of an overage that you don't think you're going to use. But it comes off of your taxes. So let's say that you make $100,000 a year gross, and you put that $6,500 into that health savings account, then you are only taxed on $93,500. Okay, so that saves you money come tax time, and as well as 401ks. Those are the retirement accounts that you don't get taxed on until you withdraw the money, because you don't get taxed on it up front. There's also something else called the Roth IRA, but I just have to save that for a different time. Investing is a different class. Okay, what are some good, so the difference between gross income is your wages before deductions, taxes, withholdings, things like that. Net income is what you will make your budget off of. You do not want to do your budget off of your gross income unless you are, putting your taxes and everything in there. You can do it this way. Well, this is actually just for your house, but you really, really want it to be off your net income, because the government's keeping the rest of it. You might see it again come tax return time, but maybe not. All right, so on this budgeting worksheet, if you guys can take it home and work on it before our next class. And what you might have to do is go back and, how many of you actually ever look at your bank statements? Old school, bank statements. So what I have found is that clients nowadays that are less than 45 or 40 or so generally do not ever look at their bank statements. In fact, one of the most common questions that I ever get is, how do I access my bank statement? Because you actually need to provide that to me when you go to apply for a mortgage, okay? So bank statements are fun little things. What happens a lot with the apps is we just look on there and we say, oh, look, I have money, I can go spend it, right? It's very cool until you don't have money, and then you bounce things and it gets ugly and expensive. But bank statements are nice because for the purposes of this budget worksheet, you can go back for the previous month. So you can pull up, December is probably not a good example. Let's say November's bank statement, and you can add up all these categories and put them on here. So you can see how much did you pay for water and sewer? How much did you pay for your cell phones? How much did you pay for your internet? How much do you pay for a car payment, et cetera, et cetera. So when it comes to things like food and things like that, you can add up all your eating out things. And this isn't an ideal budget. Let's just be real with the first one you do. The first one's going to be where your money really is going, okay? You're going to go through here and you're going to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, because you're going to add up everywhere the money goes on a bank statement, okay? Money can't go anywhere without being allocated for something. So your bank statements are all available online, usually under just statements, on the tab when you log, not on your app, but when you log into the internet, like www, like old school, go right to the page. Okay, cool. And that particular place will be a good place to fill in everything. Print that out, mark off each line, and put it in a category here someplace. That's going to tell you where all your money really, really for real is going. When I sit down and I meet with clients and I do a budget with them, what I have found a lot is you can do the really easy stuff. You make this much money, this goes out for your house, your car, your credit cards. And then they have like $4,000 left. And they have no idea where it's going.
Discretionary spending.
Yeah, they don't know how much of it's going for food. They don't know how much of it's going for gas. They don't know how much of it's going to eating out. They just don't know. And if you don't know, you can control what your money does, or your money can control you. And it's very powerful when you get to a point where you can say, I am saving $50 a month. Maybe you have to start there. I'm saving $50 and you consistently do it. And at the end of the year, you have $600 you never would have had otherwise. So on this budget worksheet, we really, really want to just do the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then in the class, we'll talk about what are appropriate categories for how much you should be spending for food and how much you should be spending kind of as an average.
Did I hear a groan over there?
There might have been one. Okay, so that's kind of like, okay, so on this one, the other rule I want to talk about is the 10% rule. There's a 10% budget rule. The 10% budget rule is 10% goes where first?
To Jesus.
Right, okay, tithe, charities, whatever your religious affiliation is. But there's two 10% rules. The other 10% is off the top should always go where?
Savings.
Savings, that's right. You pay yourself first. So when you do your budget, when we do the real one, we do operate off of net income because that's the money you have to work with generally. 10% is tithe, 10% is savings, and then you figure out how you can live with all the rest of it. And there is discussion about whether 10% comes for tithe from gross or from net. That's a personal call for yourself. Okay?
I still haven't settled that.
Yeah.
Can't get good information from anybody.
Well, even the North American Division and the GC have put out booklets on the whole thing. So, you know, and I think what they're looking at is consistency more than anything.
I don't know that there is a consistent statement that I'm aware of.
No, they're talking about individuals being consistent.
Yeah,
rather
just
than, you know.
You decide what you feel convicted on in regards to that one, and then you just consistently work within that parameter. Okay, I think that's what they're looking at. Okay, so that's budgeting. Oh, let's do this. Okay.
That's you.
Oh, no. Is it me? Oh. It's my daughter, Mother Millennial, but she'll have to wait.
Why are you gonna?
No, I didn't answer it, but can you call her and see what she needs, please?
She called because you called her.
Oh, that's probably true, but at least text her or something.
Probably just got up.
No, she's working tonight. She works swing. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about, were there any questions on budgeting besides the nitty-gritty?
No.
The nitty-gritty really is where it gets fun, at least for me. Fun. Oh, it's fun. Because it's something you can control. There's not a lot of things in your life are out of our control, right? And so budgeting and money is something that you can make a decision on, that you can work a plan towards. So it actually is kind of a fun thing. You feel better when you have a budget. It's just X amount of dollars. The X amount of dollars, you can decide what to do with it. It's quite empowering, actually, to be able to make that decision. Yes?
Is there a percentage formula that is advisable, or you can get into
Yes,
that?
we'll get into that when we do the hour class.
Okay.
But if before then you can just do your own worksheet, it's going to help you out a whole lot to know where you're at, because we're not going to keep you where you're at. But if you don't know where you came from, it's hard to figure out where to go. So, but you need to know. It's important to know.
I know. I
Yeah.
spend a lot of money on food.
Yeah.
A lot. Probably when you do the specific budgeting
Yes.
class, but do you have like an online template of this?
Well, so here's why I didn't do an online one. Yes, they do exist. You can just Google a budgeting thing, whatever. I think paper is beneficial for a couple of reasons. One is if you print out that statement, if you're able to do that. A lot of people don't even have printers anymore, but if you can do it at work or something like that, and then you do it. There's something about just writing out all those numbers. It's very similar to the idea of paying cash for things as opposed to just swiping your card. So one of the things we'll talk about in budgeting is the role cash plays in all of that. Now we do people are now just slapping their card down it's just as a different feeling. There's certain things that people struggle with discretionary spending that we want to use cash for. It's just a better way to.
Oh, I like writing it
Yeah,
out too.
okay.
But I guess we'll just keep a copy. And then
Oh, I can email it to you. I can email. I'm going to leave you guys. I'll give you a worksheet to fill out at the end that you can give me your email address, and you can tell me if you want me to send you a copy of that. It's a PDF.
Cool. And then we can print it off.
Yeah, you can make multiple copies and do whatever you want with
I
that.
had them online, but anyway.
Okay, yeah. So aside from the nitty-gritties of budgeting, we want to touch on credit a little bit? Okay. So what is credit? Credit. It affects every part of your life, almost.
Well, it's interesting because it's your proven ability to pay off debt,
Right.
and which You
You
know,
have to be in debt.
I know what's really weird. Is I understand why you say somebody said they needed to go out and buy a car.
Yes.
Well, it's really kind of sorry to say that.
Yes.
Because that has nothing to do with income formulas and everything else. Yeah, you can go out and buy a Lotus or whatever, but that may really mess up your ability to actually buy a house.
Right.
And when they go do the final check before they actually cut the check, you may have bought something that you were going to put in the house, and that may throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing, and you can't, they won't fund along.
Oh yes, you will get that checklist before you leave here today. So credit is, he did it really good, your proven ability to pay, right? So I asked my kid, there's a legal definition for this, which is confidence in a purchaser's ability to pay displayed by entrusting the buyer with goods or services without immediate payment. You don't have to write that down because when I read it to Matt, his eyes glazed over and he went, Mom, these are people that don't have adulting down yet. They don't understand that. Because I said I'm teaching an adulting class, right? So I said, so what does it mean to you? He's 21. And he says, money that isn't yours that you have to pay back with interest. That kind of covers it in a sort of roundabout way. It's when you get the credit or when you acquire the debt, it's money you have to pay back that isn't yours that you have to pay back with interest. We have a saying in the housing side of it, which is credit, well, we have to track everybody down, but it's basically you pay, you stay, you don't, you won't. Okay? It's the same with the car, right? You pay and you get to keep it. But with a house, you pay, you stay, you don't, you won't. And that's all tied into credit. So credit tends to be instant gratification. You want something you cannot afford to pay for. Okay? You do not have enough cash in the bank to pay for that article of clothing. You do not have enough cash in the bank to pay for that car. You do not have enough cash in the bank to pay for that house. There are some very good very popular financial people out there that do seminars and make a good living at all of that, talking about the all-cash lifestyle, okay? The all-cash lifestyle is wonderful only if you can afford to pay cash for your house, okay? How many people think they would be able to afford cash for a house? Raise your hand, I'd love to see it, because it's not me.
No, you would have to have cash from having sold a house to buy a house.
But you got to start with buying the first house. Right. So if you start with the first house, are you going to have, and the median household cost for a postage stamp in Clark County is about $350,000. Most people do not have $350,000 in the bank. If you don't have cash to pay for a house, you have to have credit. Credit means that you have to have debt. I love the idea of an all-cash lifestyle. I would love to pay off all my debts. I think Corey and I are at a point in our life where we don't plan to buy another house, so we can get to that debt-free lifestyle. But until you can afford to pay cash for a house, you have to have a proven ability of repayment. Okay? And the only way you can prove to a lender that's going to loan you $350,000 is with having a credit history. And we're going to talk about lots of different ways you build credit and don't build credit in the credit class because there's lots to cover there. But credit affects everything. Your credit is checked when you get cars for car insurance. They pull your credit. If you want to rent an apartment, they will check your credit. If you buy a car, if you get a credit card, if you get a hotel, you have to now put a credit card on retainer when you book a hotel. If you don't have a credit card, hard to book a hotel, you can't rent a car, you can't do anything else. Credit affects most of what we do in relation to money, okay? So it's really important to understand how credit works. It's the one thing that I think people don't know about, get bad education about, and are scared to learn about, okay? Because there's a lot packaged into how credit works. So I'm just going to talk really fast about what credit is, basically in an overview, and then we will really get to nitty-gritties in the class about your own personal credit and what you can do about it and where you want to get with it, because everybody's different in where they're at in their life with how credit affects them, okay? There are 3 major credit bureaus in the US. They are called TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. What do credit bureaus do? Anybody have any idea what a credit bureau does?
I just monitor your debt and your Well, don't they just take that stuff in from the creditors?
Yes.
The creditors make reports to them and they just track it?
Yes.
And then they sell that information to everybody else.
Yes. So everybody thinks, or most people think, that it is a government entity that is just there to exist to track your credit history. So all the different companies that you have credit with report once a month to the credit bureaus. There are 3, and they are a repository for that information. The problem is,
That's privately owned, isn't it?
the problem is, they are not government entities. They are for-profit companies, and they make their money selling your information. Okay? So how they sell your information is, how many of you have ever gotten a pre-approved offer of a credit card in the mail? They send you the
At
cute
least
little
one a
card.
week.
Yes, many of them exist, okay?
Doesn't that bring down your credit score every time it's run?
So that's a good question.
It is.
Yes and no. There's never easy questions in finance. There's no easy answers. So if you go and apply for credit, that means when you're at the store and they go, woo, today if you spend $50 and you apply for the card, you will get 20% off your bill. And everybody goes, awesome, let's do that. And they give them their social security number. The key is, if you provide your social security number, you are authorizing them to pull your credit, and it will reduce your credit score, okay, by about 5 points each time. So when we're in the credit class, we'll talk about why that's a really bad idea. I'm going to give you some of this too tonight. When you get a pre-screened offer of credit, you did not authorize them to do that. You can opt out. We can talk about how you can opt out too, so that you don't get those anymore. But when you, and it's actually optoutprescreen.com, actually. It's pretty simple. It's optoutprescreen.com. I'm pretty sure. If that doesn't work, just email me. Is it not working? I have another one.
There.
There's more. Yeah, there you go.
There's several
Yeah.
bodies in on here, so we can.
we have good. And you can stop getting those offers of credit, okay? So that's a really good thing to do.
After you get those cards does not necessarily mean
You- yeah.
gotten credit yet.
With that, yeah, exactly. What
Look,
it is.
TransUnion, Equifax, and what was the third?
Experian.
Yeah.
Okay? All right. And they use different models, all of them. So what's going to happen is, when you hear the word FICO score, you've probably heard this before. What is your FICO score? That is one of the models that they use to give you a credit score.
What is
Yes.
it? What does, that's an acronym for what?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Google knows everything, though. You could ask Google. But it's just one of the credit bureau's models that they use. And there are different brackets. Does anybody know where universally the credit scores start and end? What range are credit scores?
850 down to 4.
350, but I've never seen one in the 300s. Usually you tap out somewhere in the 480s.
Okay.
But yes, it is 350 to 850, okay? Good credit. Poor credit is generally anything below 640. That's really poor credit. Fair credit is between 680 and about 700 for a credit score, okay?
What did you say?
What was poor?
Poor credit is generally anything below 640. There are different models, but this is how I look at it from a financing standpoint, okay? 640 to, let me see, 640 to about 720 is good. And 720 to like 760 is very good. 760 and above is excellent. So people will spend a lot of time trying to get to the 850. You don't need to worry about that. Honestly, if you are above a 740, 760, you're about as golden as you need to get for all intensive purposes.
So I've heard of Credit Karma. Like,
Yes.
how can I know what number I am?
Oh, would you like to see my notes? Because that's the next thing. See right here, Credit Karma. All right, so if you have your smartphones, who brought a smartphone?
I've been down one. In fact, I didn't even bring it with me.
Okay. Did you bring your smartphone? Drag that baby out. How many of you have the Credit Karma app on your phone?
Like, I don't even know what that is.
Okay, so open up your app store and click on Credit Karma. Shoot, I should just, I'm sure this flips somehow, but,
Gonna flip it over.
oh, I'll write up here.
want to. We can.
No, it's okay. I got it. Thanks, Rod. So creditkarma.com. You can go there or click on just the Credit Karma link. Yes, it is a little C and a K.
And it comes up.
Okay. Click on it and download it on your phone.
Really?
Yes, I'll tell you. Well, you don't have to. The reason I highly recommend everybody get Credit Karma, and I don't get paid anything for recommending them, they give you a copy of your credit report and your credit score for free from 2 credit bureaus. Okay? Now, the reason that's important is because as we start working on your credit, we need to know what it's doing. Right? We need to know if it's going up. You need to know where you're starting at. If you don't know where you're starting at, you don't know what you're working towards. The reason I like Credit Karma better than any of the other apps or things that are out there is because it gives you 2 of the credit scores. Your credit card, Capital One, Discover, all of them will give you 1 credit score. But Credit Karma uses 2. They use Experian and TransUnion. And you get to also see the full credit report. If you just get the score from your credit card, it's just the score. It doesn't let you view the whole credit report.
Did you say Experian and
TransUnion.
How do they do that for free?
Okay, so how Credit Karma gets paid is they will send you offers for credit on this app. They'll go, oh, look, you have a 620 score. We think the odds of approval for this credit card is in your favor. So what you don't ever do is accept any of their offers for credit. Okay, because you want to talk to me first before you do that. But there's no reason why you can't take advantage of the benefits that they offer. They get paid by all these different credit card companies, to peddle their services. And then they probably get a cut every time somebody downloads from the app and applies for that credit. Okay, so you're not going here to apply for any of the credit cards they offer you. You are going there to apply. And it is very secure. You have to answer a bunch of security questions in order to get in that are related to your credit. So when you log in, you're going to be asked questions like, what was your car payment in 1995 or whatever, things that you should know. Or it won't probably be that specific because I wouldn't know that answer. But have you ever lived at this address? Have you ever, had this name? Exactly. So what a lot of people don't realize, is that your credit report has your entire life on it, okay? It has your employment history on it. It has your address history on it, and it has 10 years of your credit history on it, okay? Yes. Things stay on your credit report for 10 years. Right. Yes?
So I know for a while I was under my mom, so her credit was my credit.
Yes.
Does that cut off when, because now I'm on my own credit?
Right. So if you are still an authorized user on your mom's account, then you will continue to report on your credit report as an authorized user on her account. Right? So the only way you could have been under your mom's is if she gave your social security number to the credit company to add you as an authorized user. It's actually a really good way to build credit is to be an authorized user on somebody else's account. So a lot of people do that starting out. But yeah, the Credit Karma app would be really, really helpful to have that information before we take our credit class, because it'll let us know when I talk about if you have a credit score in this range, here are some things we should do, here's some things you can do. If you have no credit, it's better than having bad credit, okay? Because no credit, I know how to fix. Bad credit just takes time, all right? And I'm not gonna tell you to go buy a $45,000 car, because that's really, really bad advice, and I felt horrible for these clients. So when you get Credit Karma, you kind of have your ranges. It's really nice if you're above 700, but in case you're not, here's some ways you can increase your credit score. Okay. All right. The only one that I disagree with in the little box is number 3. I understand why they're saying it, number 3 in the green box, that says open new lines and distribute debt to increase available credit to debt ratio. That makes sense very strategically, okay? We can talk about that more in the class, but don't just...
That's an iffy?
That's an iffy, okay? The reason for that is, depending on what you're wanting to achieve with your credit, inquiries could lower your score. Okay, having too many credit cards. So we'll have people that will go and have 10 credit cards after a bankruptcy because they're trying to build credit. There's definitely ways to do it right and ways to not do it right. but it's done all the time, right? Okay. So any questions quick about credit? I know it's a really, really brief overview that I did on credit. Yes.
Just a newbie question.
Fire away. No bad questions.
So I've gotten twice, because I have my credit card and I just did gas.
Right.
So then I got this thing, oh, you've done this, you get more money.
Yes.
Does that really mean I get more money?
Well,
In the allotted amount?
actually, can you flip that over for me?
Allotted amount?
Yes.
they give me?
Yeah. I can erase it, I guess. I
Will
can.
raise your credit limit.
I just need a
If
book.
you have been with them for a certain amount of time.
Major
make your
payments on time.
and
Yeah.
everything. If you, once in a while they'll have you redo your financials on what your job is, how much you make and stuff. And then they can increase your limit.
Yeah.
I mean, you might have start out like a $500 limit or $1,000 limit. And after 6 months or something, they might bump you up to a couple
Yeah.
$1,000.
So there's not like a loophole? or
There's
something
no
I have to
loophole,
do, or-
but remember, it's not that you have more money. It means you can borrow more money because it's not your money.
Yeah, you're always working
Yes.
with somebody else's.
Lorena?
So, Chris is very interested in getting, because we don't own any credit cards.
Right.
Getting one that gives you like miles.
Yes.
Is that smart or is that just?
So two answers to that one. Depends. I'm just going to go with the depends answer for most things because it really, really depends on your situation. It can be very smart to have a credit card that pays your miles if you're very disciplined, that earns you miles if you're very disciplined. So for instance, if you have a budget that says you have $1,000 for food, gas, clothing, and you buy all the things that month on that credit card and you get the miles, and then you take the $1,000 out of your budget and you pay off said credit card, that $1,000, and you're merely moving the money from your budget to your credit card, absolutely, it's a great way to get a lot of extra miles, okay? It plays into how also credit reports. So credit cards report to the credit bureaus. Remember, the credit bureaus are history, and there's lots of things that come into play into your scores. We'll talk about that more. But they report on the statement date. So people think that the credit bureaus get their information on the last day of the month, and that's not true. Okay? Credit bureaus get their information, particularly with credit cards, with installment loans, cars, and mortgages and things like that. It is the last day of the month. But on credit cards, which is considered revolving debt, they report on the statement date. The reason that's important is if you have a $1,000 limit on a credit card and you run it up to $1,000 and it shows $1,000, so your card is maxed out on the statement date, that's going to hurt your credit. So you have to be really strategic about when you pay them off and when you run them up if you're trying to increase your credit scores. Okay? Yes.
My wife has a habit of calling and paying it off on a
Regular basis, okay.
Sometimes, a couple times a month.
Right.
I don't know if that makes any difference, it's just she feels better than having it paid off.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't matter because what happens on the statement date is what goes. And the statement date's usually 3 days, 2 or 3 days after your due date. So you pay it on your due date. Credit cards have no grace period. If you do not pay your bill on your due date, you're going to get a late fee. If you make your payment late, your interest rate's going to go up. There's virtually no grace period on a credit card. So you really, really, really don't want to be paying 26% interest because you made the payment late 1 day. Okay, it depends on the card, but generally beginner cards, no grace period, all right? Yes.
So, I hear too that if you pay your credit card off completely, it doesn't do you any good.
Okay, there's many myths when it comes to credit. You can absolutely pay it off completely. However, you need to use it. So there's a difference between running it up to $1,000 and paying it off every month and showing a zero balance with the credit bureaus, and not using it at all. If it's inactive, then it's not that it's a bad thing necessarily for the credit report, but the company could just say you don't ever use this card and offer to close it for you. And it's called closed by credit grantor. That's how it shows up on your credit report. Yes?
Is that bad when that happens?
It's bad from the standpoint that it reduces your overall availability of credit and it makes your debt ratios and availability of what you owe to your limit go up.
I did that on my Sears card, because I didn't use it for a long time, and they just said, we're just gonna drop it.
Yeah.
And, I'm going, well, okay.
Right. So
That's not a major big deal, but.
It depends.
on how they look at it.
okay, so you'll see that one of the things right there says do not close any open accounts. So a lot of people really, really feel that I have
Where are you at?
on that green square on how to increase your credit score.
Oh, okay.
Do not close any open accounts. That one's really big because they look, let's say you have 10 credit cards. Okay, don't have 10 credit cards, but for purposes of this, have 10 credit cards with a $1,000 limit each. You have a $10,000 limit. If you close 5 accounts, you only have a $5,000 limit. And so whatever you owe against your limit is how it affects your score negatively.
What if you get a notice, they say, well, we can, give you up to $25,000. Well, I don't need $25,000.
It benefits you from a credit standpoint to have a $25,000 line of credit because it's less debt to available limit. Okay?
And they go, well, we'll give you 50. And it's like,
Yeah. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
I know.
But listen, it's true. Now, your wife pays the bill off multiple times a month. I would say it benefits your credit to have the higher limit, and if you need the funds, they're available. If you cannot pay off your credit card, you struggle paying your bills, you don't have a budget, and you don't have an overview, please say no, because it's not your money, right? And what's going to happen? You're going to be maxed out at $25,000, and then you'll come see me, you'll have scores in the 600s, and you won't understand why you can't get a house.
If you're trying to want to keep a credit card active and stuff and trying to build up credit, it's like, okay, so you fill up your gas tank.
Yeah, and then you just pay it off.
And then pay it off.
Yeah.
You know,
That
Yes.
is what
shows activity.
Yeah.
so that's all it takes, because we have a credit card that gives us nothing.
Yeah,
So we don't ever use it really.
Right.
And we use other cards that give us points.
So it depends on how it affects your overall financial situation. If you're trying to buy a house and you have some credit cards that you're going to close and that reduces your availability of credit, then that can adversely affect your scores. Your scores can go down.
But
don't-
if we just put
put
$20
exactly
it's
once a
still
month,
active.
absolutely,
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
And I know this may sound a little off base, but I'm going, well then, is there really any problem with people using like their Costco credit card, their city card to buy gas at Costco?
Well, Costco actually has pretty decent rewards. So if you can get a Costco City card, that's not a bad card to get.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 4% or something at Costco
It's 5
returns or
for the
something. Yeah.
$7,000 worth of gas or
Yeah.
something.
If you can get rewards, if you can get mileage, if you can get whatever, get it. If you have one of those ugly starter cards, you start where you need to.
Yeah.
So I just have my little Wells Fargo credit card.
Yes.
And is that gonna be, it probably is all the same, but
Right.
I'm not buying a house anytime soon.
Right.
But later on down the road, my little Wells Fargo credit
Right.
card adds to the wanting to buy a house.
Yes.
Because
So
it's all just your credit.
exactly. And time of credit is really, really important. Length of credit. So what somebody will do is they'll have their little Wells Fargo credit cards. It's the first credit card they ever got. They got it when they were, say, 20. Okay? And then when they're 27, they get a better credit card and they close Wells Fargo. Because now they've got a better card that gives them rewards and points. The only problem is now they only have activity on a credit card that's a month old. Their scores are going to take a hit. Number 2, do not close open accounts. So it's length of time. It's how long have you been responsible. That's what we look at.
So then, let's say you had your Wells Fargo credit card and you got a chance to get one that has more bannings.
Right.
Okay. How long then do you want to hang on to that Wells Fargo card?
It depends. No, here's why.
But you're waiting for,
Right.
it's not a time thing, you're waiting for certain things to transpire.
Right, but it depends on how great your overall credit history. If you got 10 other accounts, close the Wells Fargo card. If it's your only account, not so much, right? So this is where Credit Karma, again, does help you. Credit Karma will rate you green to red in colors, depending on length of credit, how many accounts you have, and things like that. Okay, so it's not just looking at your report. You can also simulate things in there. I can do a class, I guess, on Credit Karma or spend some time on it. You can get in there and you can say, what if I pay off all my credit cards? My score is 6, let's say my score is 580 now. I want to buy a house. I'm maxed out on all my credit cards. You can go on Credit Karma and you can simulate paying off all your credit cards and it will tell you what your score could go to. All right? The reason it's really powerful for me because I know that when I pull somebody's credit score or pull their credit report to buy a house, I'm going to lower their score. So I listen really closly when somebody tells me their credit situation. If they tell me that there are some potential things, I ask questions like, are you maxed out on your credit card? How many accounts do you have? All this stuff when I'm meeting with them. 80% of the time, I have them get Credit Karma on their phone if I have concerns about their credit. Because if you can simulate and pay off some debt and do something before I pull credit, you can boost your score up 40, 60, 80, 100 points, right? And so we'll sit there and we'll just simulate it on Credit Karma. It doesn't affect their score. And I can give them the best possible outcome when they try to buy a house, because that is the biggest financial decision most people ever make. You want to, this is where things like budgeting, the reason we talked about budgeting first is because budgeting affects your ability to buy a house, right? Talked about credit because credit affects your ability to buy a house. So that's most of what people are that's what most people are working towards, buying a house, right? Financially. And they want to be in the best position to do that. So I'm going to draw a cute little picture here.
So I think you mentioned it.
Yes.
Is it better to have a little bit of credit card debt or to be debt free as far as your credit score?
If you are debt free and you have no active accounts, you will pull a 0 credit score. It's very, very difficult to buy a house with a 0 credit score.
So let me see if I understand what we're saying.
Yes.
I need credit.
Yes.
I need a good track record of credit.
Yes.
And in order to establish that track record, I need to use my credit card.
You need to use credit responsibly.
Right, but yes. I need to use it in such a way that I know that I'm going to be able to pay off what I charge on it every month.
You need to have a
theoretically.
Plan. Right.
You need a plan. And so it goes back to number 1, which is what? Your budget. Right? So you shouldn't charge more than you can pay off. Now, that's a perfect world. Right? Most people don't pay off their credit card every month. But if you understand how credit works and how debt works and how your budget works, you can set yourself up much better for the ability to do other things later on in life, whenever you get to those points. Remember, credit isn't just about buying a house. It affects your car insurance rates. It affects your rental. I mean, if you have bad credit scores, you try to rent an apartment, you're either going to be turned down, or if you have 0 credit scores because you're just living a cash lifestyle, you're either going to be turned down or you're going to have to pay something like 4 months rent up front. You're talking like 10 grand to get in a house. So it really, really understanding those things is important. So I wanted to touch briefly on buying a house. I should have had Corey draw. He's a much better artist than I am. This is my little house. I'm not a great artist, but I'll put it.
That's a big chunk of land, is that what that is?
No, you'll find out sad.
Okay.
Okay, look, we have 1 window in our cute little house. All right. So when it's a starter house. This is not a mansion. This goes under just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? This is a house you can't afford, right? So, and there is a difference. When I meet with my clients, I definitely spend time on budgeting and what they can, or what they should do. Not everybody does that. So you have to really know what your own limits are and what your own abilities are, because you can get talked into all sorts of things that probably aren't best for your financial situation, because you deserve it. Exactly. Okay. When you want to buy a house, buying home, I always say there is 4 legs to that table. Okay? There's the house itself. Okay? There's credit. There's income and assets. All right? Those are the 4 legs that the table that is holding up your house needs to have. All right? If one of these things isn't good, will the table still stand? Yeah, it will. It's going to be wobbly. It's going to be a little shaky, but it'll still stand. If 2 of these things aren't good, will the table still stand?
No.
Not really. Maybe if you prop the legs just kind of perfectly, it might. If you just have 1 leg, is this table going to stand at all? No. Okay, so we already talked about credit. Why is credit important when it comes to buying a house? You have to prove your ability to repay this debt. I cannot tell you how many times I have had somebody sit there and look at me and say, I can pay my cable bill on time, why can't I buy a house? Well, that's great. I'm excited you can pay $150 a month, but you're asking me for $2,500 a month. Okay? Or somebody will have a $200 cell phone bill that went to collection. You'd be surprised at how often this happens, okay? Cell phone bills go to collection all the time. Cable bills go to collection all the time. $250 cable bill went to collection. And I'll say, okay, well, this is why you have scores that aren't very good. You have this collection. Okay, that's when you don't pay your bill and they send you to a third party that's going to hound you until you pay your bill, right? And they'll look at me and they'll say, well, I don't see what the big deal is, right? And I'll say, because you're asking me for $250,000 and you haven't been able to pay $250,000, okay? We look at those things. We look at those things because that's a big debt. A bank does not want to be a landlord. We do not want to own that house when you default on it. We don't want to have to fix it up after you. We don't want to own real estate, okay? We want to sell it, give you the money, and it's your problem. So we do check things to make sure that you're able to buy this house for real. Used to be a lot easier. Used to say if you could fog a mirror, you could buy a house. Those days are gone. They don't exist anymore. That put us in the recession, okay? Literally, I had an underwriter tell me to close a deal on a guy I knew was dead, and I told her that. And she said, oh, but you're almost done the loan anyway. I'm like, he's dead. Oh. Like, he has expired. And that's the guy died. And they still wanted me to. Temperature. Yes, he could no longer fog the mirror. Okay, so what we look at on credit is your ability to repay, right? It's important because credit affects interest rate, right? The higher your credit score, the lower your interest rate.
That's good.
That's good. High credit scores are good because your interest rate affects your payment, right? However much if the interest rate's higher, the payment's higher.
And it
okay?
affects your ability to buy something.
Yes, and the higher the payment, the less you qualify for. Okay, so credit that we talked about is important. Income. This ties into something called budgeting. Debt to income ratios. You're not going to know what those are if you don't know what your budget is. Debt to income means a percentage of your debt to the percentage of your gross income. In mortgages, we qualify you off your gross income. Okay? You can get a loan where all your debts can be 50% of your gross income. That means if you make $4,000 a month gross, that's that number again, this is before Uncle Sam's taken all your money, okay? You can have total debts of $2,000 a month. Now do the math. You're probably bringing home $3,200. That means that you have $1,200 left to pay utilities, food, gas, anything. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? But if you don't have your budget, you're not going to know how much you need after your mortgage payment and all your debts because you don't know where your money is going. So it's really, really important to have that dialed in pretty good. So income's important. We go off of gross income and then how your debts relate to all of that. So again, kind of the rule of thumb is traditionally there's two ratios. There's your mortgage to your gross income payment and there's your mortgage plus all your debt to your gross income payment. Yes?
Well, this same principle would even apply even in something that was like buying a car.
Yes.
I mean, you know, the same principles apply.
Right. You need to know what you can afford, right? You just need to know what you're looking at. So that's the income piece of it. The assets piece. Who thinks this is important when you're buying a house? What are assets? Wait, I should ask that question first.
That's what is, well, easily liquefiable.
Okay. So you're right. There are liquid assets and there are non-liquid assets. Liquid assets sounds like something you can drink, but it is not fancy drinks. It is money you can easily access. That's savings account. That's checking account. That's about it. There is money that you can put in your retirement account and things like that, but your retirement account is not easily accessed. You pay a penalty when you take money out of your retirement account. It's generally a bad idea to borrow money from your retirement account to pay for a down payment on a house. You can do it. I don't recommend it because you're taking away that ability of your money over time to fund your retirement, right? So just because you can doesn't mean you. That's right. Okay. So assets. How much money do you need down to buy a house?
Sometimes you only need closing costs.
Depends.
Perfect. Students.
You're learning.
It
depends on
depends.
the credit and the income and the house.
It does. He's actually correct. The assets, how much down payment you need, depends on what type of loan you qualify for. Now, we do zero down loans all day long, okay? Zero down loans you need to have pretty good credit for. There's a lot of risk. There's no equity in the house there, right? You have no skin in the game is what we call it. If you have no skin in the game, you're a lot more likely to walk away. If you've got $50,000 of your own money in your house, you're probably going to make sure you don't walk away from it quite as easily, right? Skin in the game is important. But we do zero down loans, and they're easier than you think. I hear all the time, and I hear it on the radio, you need 20% down to buy a house. That is not true. 20% down merely means that you will get a better rate, and you will not pay something called private mortgage insurance. Private mortgage insurance is the bank's way of protecting the asset because you don't have any skin in the game. So they make you take out an insurance policy that you pay for that they get the money from if you default. Okay, so if you don't put 20% down or aren't a veteran, you're going to pay private mortgage insurance. It's called PMI for short. It's one of those things. So they're basically saying, we will loan you zero down, but you're going to pay an insurance premium for it. If your credit scores are ugly, you're going to pay a higher interest rate. So, and again, income ties into that. How much you can qualify for will determine, the amount of the house you can buy. The house matters too, because there are things about a house that are financeable and there's things about a house that are not financeable. If the house has health and safety issues, we don't do a traditional loan on it. Can't have dry rot. If you see black mold, it's all bad. The house has to be habitable and in good, working, safe, healthy condition. Doesn't mean you can't buy a fixer-upper. You can. It's a different loan. It's called a rehab loan or a renovation loan. You can do that. But for the most part, the house has to be in good condition.
Is there a point in time when a rehab loan can be rolled over into a conventional?
Yes.
Or is there such a
absolutely. It's actually an all-in-one product. Mm-hmm. So a rehab loan, when you are getting the loan, in that process, you get all your bids for work. Mm-hmm. The work cannot be done by you. Right. The work has to be done by a licensed bonded contractor. Right. And then that work all gets done usually within 60 days of closing. Mm-hmm. The money sits in an escrow account. Right. It gets dispersed to the contractor after 60 days of closing, and then it rolls into a regular 30-year conventional.
Which is good for the contractors too, because
yeah,
they know they're going to get paid.
Yeah, and there's 3 different types of renovation loans, and we do specialize in them, so they're an option.
If your roof isn't good enough to pass
right.
a traditional loan, you have to do something like that.
Right, right. So you can buy a house, or you can escrow the money, and the seller can pay for it after close. But that is really the. Mm-hmm. There are options. Generally, for your first house, it's best to just go with some of the pretty simpler loan products. One of the loan products that is available north of 179th is the USDA zero down loan. That's actually a really, really good loan.
Geographically, they moved it to north of 179th?
North of 179th right now, yeah. So it includes Battleground, it includes Ridgefield, Woodland, Camas, excludes Kelso Longview.
Well, because like Meadow Glades Main Street is 189th,
yes.
So you're talking...
So it's actually that 189th split where it turns. So everything south of 179th and 189th in that corner. Yes. Okay. The USDA zero down loan, it's a great zero down loan. It has income requirements. It has asset requirements. It has house location requirements. But there are lots of options when it comes to financing. The better this is, the better this is, the better this is, the more of this you can get. Okay. If you take away one of these, you can still buy a house. You can have, you have to have decent credit, but you can get a loan in kind of the uglier credit ranges, but you're going to pay a lot more interest for it. If you don't have a lot of income, then you're going to get a lot smaller house, which in Clark County is difficult because house prices are quite high. If you don't have any down payment, it limits you to the loans that are zero down. Right? There are closing costs. We'll talk more about that in our house buying class. But those are kind of the 3 things, the 4 legs of the table. You can still buy a house with 3. It's really hard with 2.
You've got an awful lot of weight on those 3 legs, though, to
yes.
keep the other side from
yes, and 2 is really iffy, so, it can be tough. But it can be possible with one, you just can't. If the house is good, but you have none of these other requirements, then pretty much not happening. So that's kind of this. Yes?
There are no dumb questions, right?
There are no dumb questions, ever.
Is there ever a time when it is not worth it buying a house?
Yes.
That's not a depends.
It depends.
From a general contractor, yes.
Yeah.
Let me put it to you real bluntly. Sharon and I bought a house at the end of 2006, and I had my accident in 2011. It cost us $16,000 to do a short sale on the house. It wasn't worth it.
Well, you couldn't have foreseen that.
Yeah,
No,
you couldn't have foreseen
no,
that.
But I mean,
But
I know what you're asking.
Michelle just had some clients not too long ago that wanted to buy a house. They wanted
I think that's a different question than what Yanni's answering. But you're talking about the clients that had the 446 house and needed the rehab?
It needed rehab.
Yeah.
It needed roof, septic.
Yeah, furnace, siding.
furnace. Siding was all shot.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, you can buy this house, get a rehab loan, put $50,000-$60,000 into it.
Yeah. Is it still going to be worth it at the
Is
end?
it worth doing that? Because are you raising the value of the house?
Right.
But
Yeah,
my
So
question
I know what your question is.
over renting.
Yes. So what Yanni is asking specifically is, should you rent or should you buy?
Yeah. I've watched videos on this.
Yes. Okay. So it depends. And it depends on a case-by-case basis because it's what your long-term plans are. All right. So rent is very expensive in Clark County. You can buy a house and have a comparable or lower payment that when you purchase than if you rent. Now, sometimes you get lucky and you have cheap rent. That's a different equation. But for most people, it makes sense for them to purchase because the payment is less than the rent is. There are also tax advantages to owning. So you kind of blend those things together and you pencil it out for your situation. Because if you can keep more of your own money by owning a house, because you're paying a mortgage when you rent. You're just not paying your own, right? You're paying your landlord's. In an appreciating market, you kind of miss out if you don't buy. So if you had, some people got really lucky and bought in like 2011 or 12 or 13, right? Mm-hmm. Their house is worth double, triple now. It absolutely makes sense to purchase in those options. It's just what your budget can afford. If you go from an inexpensive rent situation to double the payment on a purchase, and your budget can't afford that, and that puts financial strain on you, it's probably not worth it, right? So it's very much a case-by-case basis.
and it would also depend on, like with Sharon and I, would it be worth it for us to buy a house? It's a real gray area.
At this point, yeah.
Because when you're on Social Security, it's like, boy,
Yeah.
which doghouse are you buying?
Yeah, what you qualify for, how that compares to your rent, it's very much an individual situation. Okay, so what I just handed you is these are some do's and don'ts when applying for a mortgage, all right? I'm going to read over them really, really quick because these apply to credit, budgeting, all of it, okay? It just really makes sense. It's good to keep the originals of all your paperwork because your loan officer is going to want everything. Everything about your life we look at. Income, assets, credit, employment. There's no secrets when you apply for a loan. Your loan officer gets really good at compartmentalizing because I've done lots of loans for Adventists and I swear when I leave the office I don't remember any of your stuff. But you got to keep your originals, right? Okay. Earnest money. When you go buy a house, you have to put money down that says you're in earnest planning on purchasing this house. Okay, it's usually it can be up to 1% of your purchase price. So even on a zero down loan, you need to have access to some cash. Right? On a $350,000 loan, you might have to write $3,500 check to write your offer, and it is credited to you at closing. So it goes towards your down payment or towards your closing costs. Okay. If you're selling your house, we need all that documentation. Let your loan officer know if you plan to receive gift funds for closing. If you don't have enough money to buy your own house and pay for your own closing costs, pay for your down payment, any of that, you can get gift money. There are rules about gift money, okay? please talk to your loan officer about those rules, because I had a client crying in my office because they had $10,000 in gift money. It's coming from an unacceptable source, and their last loan officer did not tell them that. And they could have used that money in a different way and changed their life, and it's unfortunate. Very specific rules on gift money. So if you don't have enough money of your own, please have a conversation with me about gift money, okay? Let your loan officer know if you're going to change your job, quit your job, get a promotion, transfer, move out of the country, do anything, okay? Be aware that a credit report will be pulled just prior to closing. Rod touched on this a little bit about where you go under contract on a house. It takes 30 days to close, and you go, I need a new washer and dryer. And you go to Sears, and they're having a great Father's Day sale or something, and you buy that and get talked into the riding lawnmower and the grill at the same time, and you don't quite have enough money because you need it all for your down payment. So what do? If you apply right now, you get 10% off your whole thing, and you put it on a credit card. Right before you close on that transaction, we pull your credit to see if you have any new debt.
I mean, it's like within 72 hours.
Yes, it's right before we close, okay? You could have already have signed your closing papers. You think this house is yours, all right? Now you have an extra $200 in credit card debt. That credit card debt is too much for you to qualify, and you do not get your house, okay? So be aware of that. That falls on the do nots.
Nasty.
It's not a fun thing, and everybody gets this about 3 times from me. It's my lecture. Just be prepared. Okay. Don't open or close any asset accounts or transfer money around or do any of that fun stuff. Pick your savings account your money is going into and keep it there. Transfer money from your checking account. We have to verify all the money that goes into your bank account. So if you sell something and that cash goes into the bank account, I have to know where it comes from. Otherwise, we have to assume you're a drug dealer and that money is drug money. Yes?
Perfect example, my sister and brother-in-law bought a house, and they were bringing, she was bringing money in for part of the down payment. So she brings in this $10,000, which she had stuffed away in a, guess what the banker asked?
Where'd it come from?
Where did this come from?
Yeah. Yeah, we have to source everything, honestly. Every I has to be crossed, every T has to be.
That's why, like, drug money laundering.
Yeah, money laundering.
Through companies, so at
Yeah.
least it has a lot.
At least make it legit.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's cash, I'm going to look harder at it. Okay. Don't deposit any money outside of your automated payroll deposits. That's the same thing again. The only thing that should be going into your bank account is payroll deposits. If you have a yard sale and you're trying to buy a house, this is while you're trying to buy a house, okay? And $2,000 shows up, you know what I always say? Fantastic. Pay all your bills with the $2,000 cash. Don't put it in the bank. And then use the money that's in your bank because it's sourced for your down payment. Okay, don't be floating cash into your bank account. Please don't quit your job, like in the middle of this transaction. All my gray hairs have all come from stuff like this, and my children. Okay, don't make any major payments during your, not her husband. Don't make any major purchases. That's that whole same thing again. Don't buy a whole bunch of cars or anything else. You'll be surprised at how many people are super excited in a refinance. They go, I'm going to get $80,000 at closing, and they go buy a car and show up at the closing table or a bunch of furniture. Same problem. You no longer qualify because we check. Okay? Don't get a bunch of new credit card debt, any of that stuff, okay? Don't increase any liabilities. Don't run up your credit cards, anything. We pull the credit report at the beginning. I always say dig yourself a big old financial hole, crawl into it, pull the blanket over top of that hole, and don't do a single financial decision without checking with me. In the middle of a house buying transaction, you must maintain the status quo. Yes?
At what point does that ability to go back and deal with the credit issue after you bought the house, is there a time frame?
Yes, once you have the keys, I don't care what you do.
Okay.
Yes, but it's not yours till you have the keys. Okay, here's just a little questionnaire I'd like you to give because there's, I'd like to know if any of you want to get more information on any of the following topics. Okay. Let me know if you want to know anything else that's different. And if you want to meet with me on any of these topics one-on-one, because a lot of this is sensitive information, please let me know that. But I can send you credit-specific emails. I can send you how to buy your first home emails that will really kind of help answer some of these things we touched on really, really briefly.
Can you send me the email that lets us know when the prices will go down?
I will consult said crystal ball, but it's been broken for a long time.
When's the next class, or we don't know yet?
Yes, the next class is the 3rd, I want to say the 3rd.
I think you're right.
The 3rd Tuesday of, there's my phone, see? The 3rd Tuesday of February. I need to find that email. That sounds about
My
right.
only regret is there's not, there should be more people here.
There will be.
But this is the first time for everything.
There's it's a lot of information, and I just wanted to kind of touch on some of the things that we're going to get into really in detail and in some of the rest of these subjects.
Now you go tell all your friends.
Yeah, go tell all your friends.
And it's 7 again, right?
It'll be 7, yeah.
And is that every 3rd Tuesday?
Yes, except for in March, because it's spring break, so I think it's the 2nd one in March.
You said February 20th?
Yep,
Yep. So
in March.
the 13th, I think. I need to find that email.
13th, yeah.
Here's a really, really good quote, and then I'll go double check. Maybe Pastor has it in his email. Or do we have a board agenda someplace handy? I think it was on the board agenda. Okay, so here's just a thought that I've read several times, and I think it makes really good sense when you're dealing with your finances. And it says, normal is getting dressed in clothes that you buy for work and driving through traffic in a car that you're still paying for in order to get to the job you need to pay for the clothes and the car and the house you leave vacant all day so you can afford to live in it, right? That is normal. The thing is that you can change that by understanding how money works, how credit works, and how to make those things work for you. Otherwise, you're just kind of normal, and who wants to live that way? You know?